Hello, everyone. Welcome. Happy holidays. I'm just going to wait a minute as everyone joins us. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know everyone's busy with the holiday season. People are probably starting to wrap up before holiday break. A couple more people joining right now. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lavana Leyendecker. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Pennsylvania Policy Center. And we have a very special guest today because, as some of you know, the Pennsylvania State House has put together a really great holiday list of things that Pennsylvanians need in order to survive and thrive in the coming year. And so we invited this special guest to talk to us about those things. So if our visitor from the North Pole could join us.
Sure. Ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas, everyone. Happy holidays. I'm so glad that the event last week I did with Pennsylvanians Together in the Pennsylvania Policy Center was so popular that I've been invited back for this special short Zoom presentation. We're going to basically tell you today, what we all did at that event last week. Because as you know, I give out later in the year individual gifts to people who've been nice and cold, to people who've been naughty. And I recognize this year, thanks to the work of the Pennsylvania Policy Center, that I shouldn't be just focusing on individuals being good or bad, but I should be focusing on how we act collectively together. And what we achieve together collectively, we do through our government. And this year, there have been some people who've been extraordinarily nice in the Harrisburg area, in the capital region, in the Pennsylvania state government. And there have been some people who've been really naughty as well. Um, and I just want to recognize the people who've been nice and um, the people who've been naughty, and give you a chance to help me do my job. Instead of coal, which I'm kind of phasing out because of concerns about the environment and fossil fuels, we have another way to recognize people who are being naughty, and that's to send them email messages reminding them of what they should have been doing but didn't do during the year. So we're going to give you a chance to do that in just a little bit. But first, I'm putting in the chat my list of the nice things that Democrats in Pennsylvania, in our state government, have done. Um, as you know, for the first time in many years, we've had a Democratic House majority, and that House majority has passed a large list of legislation that would really help people in Pennsylvania, including those who are most in need of help, particularly this difficult time of year for many people. So I just want to go through some of these things on this list. They're really great. And I want to also point out it's not just Democrats who voted for them. In many cases, Republicans in the House voted for them. And the Pennsylvania Policy Center has been saying for a long time, if we had a Democratic majority, we could get bills to the floor of the House and both Democrats and Republicans would vote for them. And that's what happened. Not in all cases, and not a lot of Republicans, but some Republicans have voted for almost all of these pieces of legislation. So just going down it, the $15 minimum wage bill, sponsored by Representatives Dawkins and Kim, that passed the House, has not come up for a vote in the Senate. A working families tax cut, including a Pennsylvania earned income tax credit and expanded tax forgiveness program, which was sponsored by Representative Sappi, that passed the House with some Republican support. Has not even seen a hearing, let alone a vote in the Senate. New K-12 funding and cyber charter reform. We got level up funding in HB 611, sponsored by Representatives Schlossberg and Harris. Senate champions of that were Senators Hughes and Miller. We had a cyber charter reform bill sponsored by Representative Cerisi that would reduce the amount of money that is paid to cyber charter schools and put more money into our public schools. Again, passed the House with Republican support. It's gone nowhere in the Senate. The House passed a bill that would give additional funding for the whole home repairs program, a program that was initiated by Senator Saval and sponsored in the House by Representative Harris. Again, passed the House, gone nowhere in the Senate. Corporate tax reform. We've been talking we in North Pole, but even more, the Pennsylvania Policy Center has been talking for many years about closing the Delaware loophole and then closing the Cayman Islands loophole, which allows large multinational corporations to avoid paying taxes in Pennsylvania. HB 1219, sponsored by Representative Samuelson and Fiedler, championed in the Senate by Tartaglone and Haywood, passed the House. Finally, after working on it for 7 years, the Pennsylvania Policy Center saw this done. It's gone nowhere in the Senate. Representative Daley sponsored and the House passed an abortion shield law that would protect abortion providers and those coming from outside the state who seek abortions in Pennsylvania. It passed the House. It got some Republican support. It was championed in the Senate by Senators Schwank and Capoletti. Gone nowhere in the Senate. Justice for survivors. As you know, Representative Rossi, who himself is a survivor of sexual abuse, has been trying to open a window for survivors of sexual abuse to sue their abusers. It passed in the Senate as HB 2. It passed in the House as HB 2 with Republican support. It actually passed in the Senate as well, but the Senate added 2 other amendments that would be disastrous for Pennsylvania to that same bill. One which would change how regulations are passed. The other one, I'm sorry, I can't remember what it was. But even in North Pole, we heard how bad these things were. HB 2 could pass the Senate if they would bring it to the floor, but they're holding it hostage for terrible things that we shouldn't be doing in Pennsylvania. Gun safety legislation. When I visited Harrisburg 10 years ago, no one would talk about gun safety, neither Democrats nor Republicans. Now we have a House majority that, with a little Republican support, passed a background check law sponsored by Representative Perry Warren and a red flag law sponsored by Representative Jennifer O'Mara to keep guns away from people who shouldn't have them. It passed, still nothing done in the Senate. Protecting public workers. The Occupational Safety and Health Act protects private sector workers, but not public sector workers from dangerous working conditions. HB 299, sponsored by Representative Hawkins, passed the House. It's championed in the Senate by Senator Kaine. It's gotten bipartisan support in the House. Again, despite passing the House, it's gone nowhere in the Senate. They won't even talk about it. Protection for striping workers. HB 1481, sponsored by Representative Mandy Steele, championed in the Senate by Senator Costa, allows workers affected by labor management disputes to collect unemployment benefits after a 1-week waiting period. We've had terrible problems in our unemployment system, people waiting weeks and months for benefits. Under Governor Shapiro, that's being fixed. It's not totally fixed yet, but it's gotten better. So we had a bill to protect striking workers or workers affected by strikes. It's passed the House. It got Republican support there. Again, nowhere in the Senate. Retirement security for teachers and public servants. We've known for a long time that public servants and teachers could be making a lot more money in the private sector, but they've always taken jobs in the public sector in part because they knew they could have good pension benefits. Yet we haven't adjusted those pension benefits in Pennsylvania for close to 20 years. HB 1416, sponsored by Representatives Malagari and Deasy and Senate Champion Senator Katie Muth, would have a cost of living increase for retired teachers and public servants. That passed the House with Republican support too, has not gone forward in the Senate. And finally, the Fairness Act. We have an anti-discrimination law in Pennsylvania. Unlike many states, we've never extended that to people in the LGBTQ plus community. HB 300, sponsored by Representatives Kenyatta and Frankel, passed the House, again with slight Republican support. Senator Santerciero has been sponsoring it in the Senate. Again, not even a hearing in the Senate, no movement at all. It's been a wonderful thing to see Pennsylvania take some big steps forward. And what I did last Monday was to hand out gifts to the little candy canes, because we don't want to violate any gift laws. Well, frankly, we don't have gift laws in Pennsylvania, so I could give them big gifts and it wouldn't matter. But in keeping with the spirit of public spirited legislators, I gave them candy canes. I would have given candy canes to Republicans if they showed up and had they sponsored or voting for these things, but they didn't show up. And I brought some coal to Senate Majority Leader Pittman, because as the leader of the Senate and the one who determines what gets to the floor, he's responsible for these things not moving. So that's the situation we have in Pennsylvania. I'm going to see if you have any questions about any of this legislation, and maybe um, if I don't know this, because not everything gets to the North Pole, and we don't know all the details about this legislation, but maybe Levana could help out. And after that, I'm going to give you a way where you can send the equivalent of coal to the Senate, your senators, and tell them they need to be moving on this legislation. First, any questions? Or Levana, take it away.
Thank you so much, Santa, and thank you for visiting us. So yeah, we don't have a big group, so thank you for raising your hand, Frida. And if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, this is Freda. So I guess there's no level up funding, but it seems to be redirected towards infrastructure. And there seems, can you explain a little bit more about what the voucher program is?
Sure. So um, I think because it's so late in the year, House Democrats decided there probably wasn't point in doing level up funding at this time because school budget's already set. So instead, they directed the money for Level Up and then another $75 million, $175 million to a program that's going to help fix toxic schools. And we think that's a good thing to do in the state. We should have gotten Level Up funding earlier. We should be getting a much bigger investment, and we are looking forward to the Basic Education Funding Commission's report on January 11th and to Governor Shapiro's budget on February 7th or 8th to see whether we're going to actually take some major steps forward, like a $2 billion step forward with a $6 billion 5-year plan to finally fix the unfairness in our schools. There's no guarantee that's going to happen. And we'll be talking to you all over the next month or so about what you can do to try to make sure that Governor Shapiro moves in that direction. But we did get this good program on to fix toxic schools, and there are many schools in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, all over the state with serious environmental hazards. And $175 million is certainly not enough, but it's a good step forward to fixing those. On vouchers, the Senate passed a budget that included $100 million for vouchers. This would be a program that would allow parents to receive money to send their kids to private schools. The House agreed to pass that budget only with Governor Shapiro's promise to line item veto that $100 million for vouchers. They passed the budget, Governor line item vetoed it, so there's no money going to vouchers, and no program creating vouchers has been created. So even if the budget passed, there's no voucher program in place. Unfortunately, the Republicans are still saying that's what they're demanding on school funding, and Governor Shapiro hasn't backed away. In fact, he's reaffirmed his support for vouchers. We continue to think that's a very bad idea because any dollar that goes to vouchers is a dollar taken away from our public schools, because a lot of those voucher dollars go to private schools that discriminate against all kinds of people with disabilities, Black people, women, pregnant women, women who've had abortions or whose parents have had abortions. Vouchers is a terrible, terrible idea, and we're hoping that the House will stay strong in opposing them and keep them out of any future budget. Thanks for the question.
Does anyone else have a question?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Some people are arguing that there may be a part of a negotiation around fair funding of our schools, that if the Republicans will agree to the 6.2 billion if they get the vouchers. What would you be your thinking around that? Santa, that's for Santa.
It would depend on how big that voucher program is. If we could actually get $6.2 billion, which would go a very, very, very long way, and finally, after decades and decades of economically and racially discriminatory funding of our schools. If they would agree to that in return for a small voucher program, I wouldn't necessarily oppose it, even though I think vouchers are a terrible thing. But the point is, the biggest problem with vouchers is that it takes money from the public schools. If we have a promise, a 5-year plan for $6.2 billion that says we will fund the public schools fully and fairly, then a small voucher program that allows some kids for whom public schools don't work to go to a private school, I could live with that. I think most of us could live with that. That's, I think if the Senate looked different than it does now, we wouldn't have to worry about it. But if that's the price of taking a huge step forward, yeah, okay. But it's got to be a huge step forward. We're not talking about nickel and diming our schools anymore. We're talking about meeting the constitutional and moral requirement of fully and fairly funding our schools.
Do you think the teachers' unions would agree with that?
Yes, I think they would.
Thank you. Thank you, Santa.
And we've never had vouchers in the North Pole, just to be clear about that. Only public schools.
Do we have any other questions? And people can put questions in the chat as well if you want, or if you just want to jump in. All right. I just want to
I have
know.
to just ask, are you seeing this part of my hat on the left or the right? Because I meant to put it on the left, but I can't. I guess it's on my left. Yeah, okay. Just want to make sure that's clear.
Okay. All right, Susan, I will have you make your announcement, but I want to remind people that in the chat, if you would like to take action and send your email poll messages to your senators who haven't passed the legislation, you can do that. The link is in the chat. So Susan, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Susan Gobreski. I am a senior advisor with Pennsylvania Policy Center, a longtime champion of Mark's work and Mark's leadership and the work of organizing around these issues in an economic and fairness agenda. So one of the things I wanted to highlight is, as you may know, that Pennsylvania Policy Center did some work to help engage voters around the priority issues both in the Supreme Court race. Continues to focus on democracy issues, the importance of democracy, right? The people we elect making decisions about all of these other issues. And it's really important that issues play a strong role. They're one of the things that motivates people, as we saw around the Dobbs decision and abortion rights, as we've seen around healthcare. Good participation this past year. This coming year is going to be a doozy. A lot of votes. One of the things I want to remind folks about, as many of you are organizational leaders, that voting by mail, the way that we have it organized now, the state law, it's annual. People have to sign up every year. So it says permanent, but it's not permanent. It's annual. So I'd like to encourage everyone here to remind your lists and your connections that if they wish to vote by mail, that they should sign up for that list. They can actually change their mind later. They can update their registration. There are ways that people who want to vote by mail may want to vote by mail, but end up deciding that they want to go vote at the polls. They can do that. And we'll be providing information both about what the election agenda and the democracy agenda for Pennsylvania is in January. Hint, it'll be what it has been, which is, sorry about moving, my foot fell asleep. Focusing on voter access, voter convenience, making sure that voters are able to participate, reminding people that not everyone has equal access. Some people have to work 2 jobs, live farther away from the county, don't have their own transportation if they need to communicate with the county office. We'll be continuing to talk about voter education and supporting counties. Work that this organization in its previous incarnation did actually led to the addition of $45 million in the state budget last year that went to counties, or the previous year. Lasterday is a word my 4-year-old couldn't coin 15 years ago. Some point in the past, doesn't really matter when. We'll be looking at Act 88 and working to expand drop boxes as well. But since you're on lists and many of you are communicating with others, please make sure to remind folks that if they want to vote by mail, to go ahead and get themselves signed up. at the beginning of the new year. And we'll be providing more content around that in the coming year. I think I covered what I was supposed to cover.
Thanks, Susan. That's a good reminder. And everyone is aware that 2024 is coming up. It's going to be a big election year, so get ready. Um,
I have
and
I have one thing I forgot to mention, if
Go
you don't
ahead.
mind.
Yes.
We had actually one other piece of legislation on our list. That is the Child and Dependent Care Credit. That's a tax credit that allows people who have to pay for care for either a child or a dependent or a spouse who's disabled, who needs care, so that someone could work. That was on our list, and we took it off the list because it passed as part of the budget action last week. So they were listening to us. We did this event on Monday. They picked one of the 13 bills and they included it in the final budget. So people do listen to these things. And but one out of 13 is not a great record, and we gave them maybe half of one piece of coal less than we would have otherwise, but they still got a big bundle of coal.
Okay.
Santa,
Yes.
I was told that that's both a gift and a cold because many people said to me they passed the special prosecutor law because they wanted that child dependent tax credit. That was the negotiation. If they wanted that, they had to pass that special prosecutor law.
I heard that there was a deal made, but I've heard 7 different versions of what that special prosecutor bill got us.
I heard this from the people directly involved.
Okay, well then that was a shame because that special prosecutor bill is a terrible, terrible thing.
Great. I just want to note before you ask your question, Freda, that Quentin asked a question in the chat about priorities, and Santa noted that everything on the list should pass, but minimum wages definitely are priority coming up for next year just because it's so long overdue and we know that we have the votes to pass it. Freda, you had another question?
Right. I don't know how many of you know what's going on in Erie, but for one thing, we did manage to flip our county council. It'll be blue next year with a dino on the side. But the county executive cut a deal with Gannon University to rent a significant part of our library for a water quality research lab project. And so some of us met with, there's over 3,500 people have signed a petition against it. It was done with almost no public knowledge ahead of time. It's a big deal here in Erie. And some of us met with the Gannon University president yesterday, and then we were talking afterwards in a restaurant. And somebody made the comment that these are people, Erie County United, other groups, that people who are doing issue organizing, that they do all this work to build momentum around their issue organizing, and then it's election year, which it always is, and everybody drops everything and works on the elections. So some of the people said, we're not going to do that anymore. Well, I mean, I don't know how, looking at, for example, the composition of the county council and how critical it is for us to be able to put the brakes on a batshit crazy county executive that we have by having more Democrats on the council. You have to work on election issues. But some of you people with a little more real years in the trenches behind you, what would you say to that conversation?
Well, as you know, Santa's operation is totally nonpartisan. So,
all right. But
I don't comment on elections except to say it's really important that people vote. But the two things go together. If we want elections to turn out the way we want them to turn out, we have to get people to understand what the stakes are. And to understand what the stakes are, we need to do advocacy for the public policies that are really critical to people, policies like the one we talked about, which will make enormous differences in people's lives. We have to do it 12 months a year, 52 weeks a year, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. We have to stay on it and get people to understand what's at stake. Folks on this call, you pay attention, you know what's going on, but lots of people don't. And I'm only around, a couple of days in December. I can't do all this myself. You've got to be doing that work. And if you do that work all year round, I think elections will come out a lot better. Having said that, I will point out that there's a really critical state senate election in Erie in 2024. And the future of much of this legislation may depend on how that election turns out.
Great. Matthew Muncy has a question in the chat, Santa, if you want to address it.
I think you kind of answered the question, Matthew. We gotta get people to understand what's at stake. Too often people, don't focus on because look, it's hard to follow. We have a very complicated political system. People have lives to live. They have children to take care of. They have parents. They are trying to make a living. People can't focus on everything that's going on in government. That's why we do things like try to boil it down into the 12 good things that we're celebrating this time of year and reminding people of who's supported them and who stood in the way. So anything you can do to spread the word about what's at stake will help motivate people to make the right choices when it comes to election time, and will also motivate them to vote.
Great.
So don't just take this action. Put it on your social media. Put it on your Twitter or X or whatever it's called. Put it on what's the new one called?
Threads.
We haven't gotten Threads in the North Pole yet, but we're gonna work on that. Put it on Facebook. Send an email to your friends. If each of you could get 10 people besides yourselves to take action, and then they get 10 people, we'd build a real movement that's more effective than anything I and my reindeer can do.
All right. Any last questions for Santa? Or Mark? Well, thanks everyone. I am so excited to get started in 2024, and I hope everyone has a wonderful and restful holiday season. Whatever you celebrate, get some rest. It's going to be a big year next year, and we're looking forward to seeing all of you then.
Merry Christmas, everyone. Ho, ho, ho. Happy holidays. Clean your chimneys between now and December 24th. Thank you.
Goodbye.